Hey there, everyone. This is Mr. Anderson. I'm the Korean College Counselor here at CV, and I wanted to go through a topic that might not be completely popular with everyone, and yet is something that, when you look at what's going on in the United States and when you look at the job market, it's just something that is really important to talk about. I have students that come to talk to me all the time that just basically say, I don't want to go to college. I want to do something else. Or they come to me and they say, I want to do a certain career, but they're planning to go to college and that doesn't really match. And so, what I kind of want to do is to kind of talk about um, what happens if you're not wanting to go to college? What happens if you want to go a different path? And what other paths are out there for college? Unfortunately, we have a stigma in the United States that basically says after high school you should be going to college, but honestly that doesn't even match the current job market. And so let's kind of dig into that. First of all, I want you to know the good news is you don't have to go to college to make a good living and to have a great career. Ultimately, there are a lot of paths toward having financial stability and to be able to find a lot of joy in the things that you do. There's a lot of paths to different careers that don't involve college that are sometimes a little more non traditional in our modern day thought of life after high school. But that is the good news. You don't have to go to college to find that stability, to have a great career. So let's talk about kind of what we're going to talk about. I'm going to talk about a little bit of a reality check, talk about future projections, talk about how the future education is essential to the future. We're going to talk about apprenticeships, trade schools, the military, and we are going to talk a little bit about community college. I know what you're thinking. Wait, that's a college. But I'm going to talk about how some of the programs that they have at the community college are maybe a little bit different than you might traditionally think that they are. So let's dig into this first and let's talk the reality check. So we have a big push, even here in Washington State, that basically says all kids should go to college. I find that really unfortunate. The reality is that not every kid needs to go to college. Not every kid needs to go to a university to be able to have a good stability. In fact, if every kid did, there are not jobs enough out there for all of those students to be able to go to. Um, so let's talk about like how important education is though in general after high school. When you look at the trends from 1973 to 2020, the number of unskilled jobs in the United States has dwindled rapidly. Um, there are just not many unskilled labor jobs out there. While some people that are my age or older are still in jobs without formal education after high school, um, they're relying on their job according to the experience that they've had. But as a young person going in, um, there are just not a lot of jobs that you can go into that are really stable that actually don't require any kind of training or education. So some form of education really is important. Some form of that. That doesn't mean a university. It doesn't necessarily even mean a community college. But some form of education after high school is critically important. When you look at the fastest growing occupations in the United States, this is a study that was done by Georgetown University. You'll notice that in a lot of those areas, these are the four biggest areas: STEM, healthcare professionals, community services, and healthcare support. Most of the jobs that are available are ones that do require some form of future education or post secondary education or training. Again, that doesn't mean necessarily university education, but it does mean it needs some kind of education. The long and the short of it is future education is necessary. It is important. Kids should be thinking about that, but not necessarily college. In fact, if you look at um, the issue that's happening in the United States with college is kind of interesting. First of all, if you want to ask yourself why shouldn't you go to college, well, one of those reasons is the expense. If you look at the tuition and fees in the United States, if you want to go to a university, you're talking a significant expense difference over going to a community college or going through a trade school. So you're talking about a huge financial burden on that. Um, you're also talking about in the United States, our students are taking on massive debt. If you look at the growth of debt from 2003 to 2018. We're talking almost doubling that. Um, that's unfortunate because students are leaving without necessarily a clear path toward a job and a huge amount of debt. We don't want to be saddling our students with debt unless they have a clear path to a stable career. Also, in reality, it doesn't guarantee a job. These are the five majors with the highest unemployment rate in the United States. Some of these are jobs that your students or students that you might be considering, but honestly, that does not mean it's a clear path toward a job. What you need to be doing is you need to really look at your job that you want, your future career, that purpose that you're really looking for in your future and for your vocational purpose, and try and figure out what kind of an education is needed for that, not necessarily just rushing to a university and then figuring it out along the way. Honestly, by the end of the 2019, this was pretty shocking. 33.8% of college graduates in the United States are underemployed. That means that they're working a job that requires less education than they have received. What that means is we have too many college graduates that are graduating from college that are not really employable because maybe there are not even enough jobs out there for the degree that they had. That's where we need to start looking at the job market different. And parents, I'm going to speak to you. This is where we need to kind of think a little differently about your students' future. It's not all about the university. Students, you don't have to always think about the university as your clear path, because it's not a clear path to wealth or even financial stability. So let's look at what's kind of happening in terms of future projections. So in Washington State, when we're looking at the annual growth rate of jobs from 2017 to 27, you'll see that a lot of the areas that are growing at a rapid rate are some kind of a STEM related career. But we actually have some pretty solid growth rate in Washington State, anyways. But what you want to do is, I mean, one of the things that you would always want to consider is what areas are growing, because if you can be employed, gainfully employed, and making a solid living, students, then this is possibly one of those things that you should be looking at. Um, Honestly, in terms of a lot of the trades, that's where we're seeing a lot of high growth. Part of that high growth is due to the massive number of baby boomers that are retiring. And unfortunately, there are not enough young people to fill those positions. Great example of that is here in Spokane is our manufacturing sector. In terms of like machining, CNC machining operating, we have a lot of baby boomers that are retiring from those jobs. Those are really stable, good paying jobs, and we don't have enough young people that are filling those jobs. So honestly, they're begging the baby boomers to stick around a little while, offering them raises and financial incentives to try and stick around. Or even the people that are in that job, they're being given a lot of overtime because there are not enough people. Honestly, salaries for high paying careers are expected to keep rising. I mean, if you think about plumbers here in Spokane, the growth rate of their salaries of plumbers in Spokane has been going up so steadily in the past 20 years, and a large part of that is there are just not enough plumbers. And so the fewer plumbers there are, the more these companies are having to pay for it, and then the more the consumers are having to pay for plumbing services. That means it's an opportunity for students, not just in the area of plumbing, but in all these type of trades areas, because there are just not enough of them to fill the demand that we have in the marketplace. Now, I want to emphasize again, if you don't go for any kind of future education, you're really looking at unskilled labor, which typically equals a low wage job. Unskilled labor in the United States is shrinking rapidly, and the number of unskilled labor jobs in the United States is significantly dwindling. If you remember those stats that I gave earlier, I mean, those numbers are shrinking at a rapid rate. So really what you need to be thinking is future education is necessary. It's just about what kind of future education is going to be a good fit for you. If you look at this, is kind of interesting. In the state of Colorado, they did a long-term study um, on the future education paths to skilled work, and you'll notice here that while people that are graduating with a certificate degree of less than 1 year or even a 1 year up through the associate's degree, yes, there are some differences in terms of your first starting salary. But if you look at after 10 years or 10 years after graduating with that degree, those careers are almost all paying around the same amount because skilled labor is in high demand, and skilled labor is what is going to give you, again, that financial stability. So, one thing I would encourage you to do is to not think about those old charts that would say, well, a community college degree will only earn you this amount and a bachelor's degree will earn you a lot more. That's not necessarily true anymore. Yeah, sometimes those initial degrees will, I mean, that initial job, that first job that you have might actually earn you a little bit more money. But honestly, a lot of those kind of even out with a little bit of experience. All right, so let's actually talk about some of the pathways um, without college, a different route than college to get you into uh, a good, stable career. And one of those is apprenticeships. These are things that they're growing rapidly, actually, in the United States. Even here in Spokane, the apprenticeship opportunities are growing because businesses and industries are trying to find new ways to provide education that gets people into those careers as quickly as possible because they have such high demand. So let's talk a little bit about what an apprenticeship actually is. Honestly, this kind of is reductionistic, but what an apprenticeship is training on the job with an expert. So you're working alongside somebody who's an expert and has been doing this for a long time. Apprenticeships are oftentimes connected with a union, but not always. There are just a lot of unions in the United States, even here in Spokane, that coordinate those apprenticeship programs. Apprenticeships are typically 3 to 5 years, and you get paid from day one. You get paid every hour of your training, so from day one through year 3 or 5, plus benefits on top of that. The pay is usually really solid. In fact, it's significantly higher um, than a lot of careers or first jobs that you would get even after a bachelor's degree. After 3 to 5 years, it is oftentimes what's called journeying out. You journey out, you test out, or you graduate, or you are able to file the paperwork to actually get your journey card. That's not the same way in every apprenticeship, but a lot of them work that way. A journey card just basically means you don't have to work alongside anyone anymore. You're actually an expert yourself and can actually go. Um, and so each year of your apprenticeship, your pay goes up. And by the time you journey out, you're making significantly more than even your first year as an apprentice. Some examples of apprenticeships here in Spokane: we have a lot of aerospace apprenticeships, carpenters, heat and frost insulators, um, iron workers, plumbers. That's only a small amount of the different types of apprenticeships that we have. A lot of them are connected with the construction trade, but not all of them are. I encourage you really to start checking out what kind of jobs are available. In fact, here are some links that you can look at. The Apprenticeship Training Center that's connected with Spokane Community College is phenomenal. I'd encourage you to check that out. Not only do they host a lot of the apprenticeships, but they actually help place students into those as well. WorkSource Spokane has information on apprenticeships. The Construction Center of Excellence has a lot of information on apprenticeships too. And then SCC actually runs a program called um, it's called STP. It's the Skilled Trades Program. It's basically a pre-apprenticeship program where you can go for a few months. It's basically like a 1 quarter at a community college, but all you're doing is you're learning how to be an apprentice, what types of things would be a part of that. You actually get a chance to try out several industries. You get to hear presentations from people in the industries, and you actually get a couple entry level certifications through that program too. It's a phenomenal opportunity. Um, Obviously, the benefit of an apprenticeship is you're earning money from day one through your future education. That's amazing. And honestly, this could be a great opportunity for a lot of students, but not a lot of students even consider that. So let's talk about another opportunity to go besides just the college, and that'd be trade schools. And I know that that could sometimes sound like college, but trade schools are oftentimes a little different in how they structure and the focus of their curriculum. So trade schools are typically shorter programs than going to college. So they're usually not a 2 year program or a 4 year program. They're typically right around a year or less. 9 months is oftentimes pretty typical. It can be fairly expensive from the trade schools because most trade schools are a private institution, and so the you really have to look at the costs, and you have to count the costs to how much you're going to make after you graduate from their program. You really need to make sure that you're comparing that and making sure that you're making wise decisions about that. They're oftentimes connected with an industry or a business, um, but not always. A school like Carrington is not connected with that industry or business. They just provide education programs for it. Trade schools will usually focus their curriculum on the practical aspects of being in that industry. They won't do a lot of general education. So you're not usually having to take English and history and math, and you'll learn any kind of math that you would need to for that industry in those classes. For example, in like Spokane, if you look at some of the examples of some of the trade schools, these are just, again, a small number. But Northwest HVAC does teach some math at Northwest HVAC. In fact, it's really important to actually work on those heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems. However, they learn it in um, kind of embedded in that actual curriculum. Some other examples of just trade schools in Spokane: Paul Mitchell School in Spokane Valley, Anvil Welding, if you're really interested in fabricating, or even Therapeutic Connection School of Massage. There are other ones again in Spokane. But these trade schools allow you to kind of really dig into the industry that you're wanting, that you're passionate about going into, and allow you to really focus on that in a shorter time frame. Again, you got to watch the cost on that, but that might be a good fit for you depending upon what career you want. Here are just a couple of websites of some of those. It's not all of the trade schools here in the Spokane or the larger Spokane area, but at least there are some that you might want to check out. Now, let's talk about one other thing that I think that people don't always talk about, and that's the military as a route to future education. The military absolutely provides you future education. They provide training, and a lot of training, very targeted training, um, and compacted in a small amount of time. But they do that along with preparing you to go into some kind of a trade aspect in the military. The one thing I want you to understand is the military isn't just for quote unquote soldiers or infantry. Yes, absolutely. If you're interested in that, that would be a great route to go. But that is not all that the military has to offer. You have jobs in the military that are ranging from tech trades to more traditional trades, to even the medical field. In order to get placed into those, you have to take the ASVAB, and your ASVAB score determines the options that you have available to you, because certain jobs in the military require certain ASVAB scores. So I encourage you to make sure to practice a lot taking the ASVAB before you end up taking it for your first time. We do offer the ASVAB twice a year at CV. Unfortunately, this past year we only offered it once, but we do offer it twice a year, typically in the late fall and in the spring. The military training is typically 3 to 12 months, depending upon the program that you're going into. That doesn't include basic training. That's really the training that comes after that. They provide job skills and experience that can lead to a job after your military service. So if you only want to stay in one term in the military, like 4 years, you can get out after that, or you can stick around longer and get raises, get promotions, those type of things. But then when you get out, you have learned a trade, and that can be applied after your military service. The pay is good in the military, uh, but the benefits are amazing. So I want you to consider that even though the pay might not look always as comparable to a job outside of the military, the benefits far surpass most private industries. Some examples of some trade jobs that you can have in the military: things like a mechanic, whether that's on aircraft or on jeeps or diesel or whatever, networking or cybersecurity, hospital corpsmen or medics. It's basically like nursing, a linguistic, so going into linguists and electronics. There are so many jobs though that the military needs. I would encourage you to check out some of those options. Here are some websites that you can actually go to check out some of the military jobs. So on military.com, they have um, just a nice resource to look at all the military jobs. Today's Military has it as well. Or you can go to each of the military branch sites and check out the individual jobs in the individual branches. And then finally, one of the things I want to talk about is community college. I know it's college, and the whole purpose of this is I don't want to go to college. But let's talk about why this might be a little bit different for you. Community college has a lot of benefits that go far beyond just being a college. Number one, they're local and close. So we end up having 3 community colleges here in our local region that are within driving distance. Most programs are between 1 to 2 years to get through. Most of the programs don't actually feel like traditional college. In fact, a lot of programs at the community college, besides a standard AA, if you go into one of the programs, a lot of the more general requirements are applied. So like the math is applied into like being a mechanic. So what kind of math do you need to know to be a mechanic? What kind of math do you need to know to be an electrician? What kind of math do you need to know to be a nurse? It has very practical aspects of that. A community college is typically going to be very inexpensive, especially when you compare that with like a trade school. They're going to be significantly more affordable because the state subsidized that tuition. It can require some core classes. I want you to understand that. So that is one aspect that sometimes can feel a little bit more like a traditional college. But if you look at some of the examples there in Spokane or the larger Spokane region, you'll see how not all of those are going to be seeming like a typical college experience. Like they have a 1 year welding program, they have an electronics program, whether it's working on a lot of different type of electronic equipment or even medical electronic equipment. They have multiple automotive programs at SCC, manufacturing, including CNC machining, networking. At SFCC, they have an audio technician program, cybersecurity. They have a few others. North Idaho College has a lot as well. And I know North Idaho, that's across the border. Do you pay out-of-state tuition? Well, it's not actually too bad for Washington residents because we're so close. But NIC is a great option, especially if you live in Liberty Lake. But they have all sorts of things in allied health, aerospace, carpentry. I would encourage you to check out their websites because SEC, Spokane Falls, and North Idaho College just have a wealth of programs that you can look at to see which one might be the best fit for you. Sometimes just going through the programs, and they SEC and Spokane Falls each have a page on their website called What to Study, and they go through programs A to Z, and they list out all their programs. It's kind of fun to look through the programs, see which ones they have, and then you can click into them and see the kind of classes that you would take. It's a lot of fun. You can even go to the Washington Community College's large website. It's the State Board for Community and Technical Colleges here in Washington State. Because just because we live in Spokane and just because it makes sense for most of our students to attend a community college here in our local area, there are some other programs that are specific to other community colleges around our state that you might want to consider too. For example, Big Bend Community College in Moses Lake has an aviation program where you can learn to be a pilot, and you can go through their whole aviation program, and then they're articulated with several colleges where you'd be able to transfer from there to a 4-year college if you wanted to go that route. So there are lots of programs, and you can check that out there. So when you hear about all those options, when you hear about apprenticeships, you hear about trade schools, you hear about the military as a route to get future education, or even those community college programs to get you right into those practical careers, I want you to just be reminded it is about getting future education, not necessarily college. Future education is your pathway to financial stability. It really is. Some form of future education or training is your pathway to getting a good, stable, in-demand career. And I encourage you to check out those options that we talked about here. Without that future education, you're looking at primarily unskilled labor jobs. But I want you to also know it's about going and getting some kind of training. It doesn't mean you have to go to a university to get that. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an understanding. It might even spark some questions. Just know that all the counselors at CV, we're here to help you. If you have any questions, please reach out to us. Otherwise, good luck planning, good luck exploring, and looking at your options for after high school. Just remember, education is important.